Welcome back. Welcome back to the 5th International Academic Forum organized by ARIISW Shukutoku University. Now, our trip to collect voices and ideas on social work started in Tokyo, moved to Johannesburg, Montreal, Kansas, Manitoba, Auckland, Kuala Lumpur, and now we are back in Tokyo. How was your journey? Did you find something new, idea or perspective through it? I hope so. For me, it was a brilliant time to share with intellectual idea and point of view with friends and colleagues beyond the borders. Now we are here to conclude this journey for a while. We move to the final session, the roundup session. ARIISW team designs this session as, firstly, each coordinator will reflect their moderated session from North America, Oceania, Pathway, ARIISW, and ARIISW. Then we will open dialogue with participants. So participants who want to comment and ask the session, please raise your hand using the icon. After that, our colleague, Dr. Joseph, will deliver the conclusion of 24-hour relay session. In the end, we would like to ask for comments shortly from the University of Johannesburg. Now, let us welcome Dr. Nicole Ivers from Montreal, Canada. Hello, Nicole.
Hello, everyone.
So, go ahead.
I'd like to thank Shukutoku University and ARIISW and all the organizers for this brilliant conference tour around the world. I send greetings from my co-presenters, Dr. Edward Kanda and Dr. Michael Yellowbird. Dr. Kanda sent me a slide that he wanted me to share with you for the highlights of his presentation earlier today. His presentation was supporting ethically and spiritually congruent practice, and it was part of our Indigenous social work education and practice session. The main points that he wanted to leave with you were the importance of adapting without distorting, promoting therapeutic mindfulness within the context of helping clients to cultivate well-being holistically insofar as it fits their goals, and avoiding the promotion of unhealthy egotism and self-preoccupation while promoting personal growth, problem solving, and symptom relief. Dr. Yellowbird shared his research and work with neurodecolonization and how trauma can colonize the mind and body. It's very important, I think, as I was reflecting on their presentations, to remember the importance of decolonization both individually and collectively. Dr. Yellowbird pointed out that this is an ongoing process for us. And as well, Dr. Kanda reflected on the same element, the importance of engaging in a lifelong reflection on decolonization, healing, spiritual growth, at the same time as promoting social and ecological justice, respectful partnership and collaboration. Another aspect that I found common across all sessions was this idea of relationship and interconnectedness and dependence on each other. I think that Western social work and Western views this is a generalization, but Western views prize the independent and see dependence as problematic. And I think that that is also something that's a very different with an Indigenous approach to social work, where there's the primacy of relationships, respectful relationships. And this highlights the importance for social work education to ground social work that's enacted and practiced in Indigenous and Buddhist communities to really create the foundation from Indigenous principles. I mentioned the principles from the project that I'm looking at or the program that I will be doing in Nunavik, in the northern part of Quebec. Inuit Kiamiyat Tukangit it stands for knowledge which has been long held by Inuit. And it's these practices, these principles that we will integrate into the BSW, the Bachelor of Social Work degree that will be delivered in Nunavik. It's a holistic approach, as I presented earlier in the figure that highlights the student at the center and the involvement of the universities and the communities and the elders. So I think that I had heard actually from a Mohawk elder named Rod Jeffries from the Mohawk territory of Tyendinaga, who reminded me of to think about what we're trying to nurture in our students. And when we're thinking about decolonization and indigenization, we have to think both personally, individually, and collectively what this means for us. What are our thoughts about this? And it's only through that self-reflection, meditation, and mindfulness as we move in our work that we can engage in healing and growth in this process of decolonization. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nicole. Please send our best regards to Professor Kanda and Professor Yellowbird.
I will. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So nextly, we cross the Moana. Kia ora, David. David, thank you very much for coming back here. So, okay, so we will come back to the New Zealand, Aotearoa, New Zealand later. So move to, shall we move to Malaysia? And then we will go back to Aotearoa. Hello, President Duru. Can you hear me?
Yes, hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly. Now floor is yours.
Okay. So I will, on behalf of the presenters today, this morning session on spirituality, I'm just going to highlight, we have discussed a lot of things for about 1 hour, and I'm going to just highlight the common themes that's coming up during the discussion of spirituality, not in any particular order, but just randomly I picked up the salient points. First, there is a concern that in a multicultural society that we advocates of wanting to bring spirituality in the social work curriculum should be mindful of the nature of those multicultural society. It is much easier to promote this idea in a homogeneous society, like in Japan, for instance, though not necessarily everybody are spiritual, but nonetheless, the society is homogeneous. Unlike Malaysia, for instance, where we have 3 or 4 different ethnicity and 3 or 4 ethnicity with more than 6 religions to consider. So that is point number 1 in discussing this issue of spirituality. And then there is a point that has been raised that we need to move on from just this sort of verbal session through forums and conferences and seminars to move on to research and publication. Definitely, we need that. But in terms of reaching out to society, it is felt that this 3-pronged approach should go simultaneously. Because if everything is, if it's focused simply on publication, we fear that those wonderful ideas and theories and concepts will not reach to the grassroots when you're talking about high impact journals and all this. Unlike having forums, open forums like this, where undergraduate students can attend, to super senior professors can attend, and we share our common experiences or different experiences. So in that, from that point of view, we believe that a 3-pronged approach is needed. Ongoing verbal session like this is needed. Research is needed, of course, because it has to be evidence-based, then it will be much more saleable, and publication to make it more authentic or scientific, so to speak. Then the next issue of religion versus spirituality. Who has the domain? Who has the, under whose roof it should belong to? Is spirituality under the roof of religion, or religion is under the roof of spirituality? So this debate, if we were to listen to Dr. Toton's presentation, he said that in Indonesia, he called it, people there are they do not separate religion and spirituality. What they have commonly is what they call living spiritually. So there is no separation or classification that this is spiritual, that this is religious. So in that sense, when you come and say, I'm a spiritualist, it comes a little bit unfamiliar to the folks in Indonesia, for instance, as opposed to when they see somebody coming from a religion, any particular religion, and presenting spirituality in it. So it's living spirituality. An interesting topic, and I believe that is quite common in Asia. Okay, and there is also from Dr. Joima Reyes. I like her concept of, excuse me for my bad Filipino pronunciation, likus na lakas to pinabagong lakas. As far as my interpretation is concerned, it is spirituality is a process of empowerment and emancipation. Because ultimately, even though you feel that in life you have been unjustifiably being a victim of something, but there is a life after, and there will be ultimate judgment. So those sort of things, in trying to impart to our clients, is tremendous, because you're building them, you're empowering them. So that is religion versus spirituality. And then there is the issue of the definitional issue. There are concerns, will religion contaminate spirituality? We can go on to the issue, but just to take on the point of one of the Islamic jurisprudence, Imam Malik, is a great scholar from the school of Maliki school of thought. He said, structure without spirit leads to fasik. Fasik is an Arabic word. That means impiety, impious, mischief. Conversely, spirit without structure leads to zindik, another Arabic word, or the closest thing to in English word is heresy. Okay, so we need both. We need we need the extrinsic and we need the intrinsic. So these are the discussion and the points given through during this morning session. And then there is a question from a participant from Mongolia asking whether should we be presenting, if we were to present spirituality in our courses at the BSW level, should it be general or can it be specific? Buddhist spirituality, Buddhist social work, Islamic spirituality, Islamic social work, and so forth, or general? Well, I leave it to each of these universities and countries to decide that. They know best their culture, they know best their people, stakeholders, and the values and the culture that they are living in. But as definitely there is a need to present a course in spirituality, not as an elective, but as a core course, at least one course at the undergraduate level. And that leads to the second point, to a related point of teaching staff. Dr. Kanda, in one of his articles a long time ago, he mentioned about this is the problem that one is facing when we're trying to teach spirituality, that staff themselves are not confident to teach that for simple reason of unfamiliarity to the topic. So if you are unfamiliar, how are you going to teach? If you are not, and also they might be averse to anything spiritual and religious. This is a phenomena that I'm observing throughout these years of teaching, that there is an averse on anything spiritual because it is not scientific, and religion because it is in the domain of morality. Why are we afraid? Why are we shying away from talking about morality and something which is not scientific? Just to end a point, I remember when I first came back from Malaysia after gaining my degree from America, presenting in a conference and talking about professional social work and all these things today. One old man asked me, he said, "Doctor, can I ask you a question? You're presenting definition of professional social work, blah, blah, blah. But can you tell me, these people," he named Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Jesus, Mahatma Gandhi, Moses, all the big prophets and sages, aren't they social workers? That put a pause to my enthusiasm. So these are the things that we discussed this morning, and many things to be. It's just a step. It is just a beginning. We're just touching the surface. But definitely there is an interest in the topic, and it should be pursued by those who are interested in it to the level of at least have a course in your university. Okay, thank you. That's it for now.
Thank you very much, Professor Zuru, Professor Hata. Thank you. So, do we connect with David? Kiora?
Kia ora, konnichiwa.
Thank you very much for coming back.
Yes, my apologies for missing the last time I was invited in.
No worries. So, floor is yours.
Thank you. Can I begin again by thanking and acknowledging the organisers of this wonderful seminar and for mounting such a global and relatively complex operation of addressing the themes of decolonization, indigenization, Buddhist social work and spirituality relating to social work and social work education. We in Oceania were very pleased to be part of this, and I particularly was happy to have colleagues from two Indigenous institutions who presented on the programs, social work programs they teach, which are rooted in an Indigenous framework. We heard from Alma Winiata Kenny, their program, which is very much based in a particular tribal group, Māori tribal group within Aotearoa, New Zealand, talked about the importance of basing their program on traditional ancestral wisdom that has been handed down through the generations. And they've found a way to link that to social work, and so they're an approved social work education program, and they operate very strongly from that traditional Indigenous base. And then we heard from Jodie Owen, who teaches in a national Wānanga Indigenous institution, and they have sites around Aotearoa, New Zealand, and they talk about teaching a bicultural program where they align traditional Māori Indigenous knowledge with Western knowledge, indeed a range of knowledges. And we heard about the importance of fundamental concepts from the Māori world that they are working with, but working to apply them so students can practice in both traditional Māori settings or Māori, strong Māori influence settings, as well as mainstream settings where the level of Māori influence might vary. I talked about teaching a treaty-based program where, with referencing the original treaty between Māori and the British, is increasingly within our country seen as a basis for how we should operate. And certainly in social work, health, social service settings, a lot of government settings, that's a key base on which to operate. And progressive professions like ourselves, teaching, nurses, medicine, etc., would claim this type of base. So our challenge is how to realise Māori Indigenous values in our social work program when our institutions and a lot of the staff have varying levels of knowledge. We were just hearing from Professor Hutter about the issue of teacher competence to deal with Indigenous values and principles. And that's certainly the same in Aotearoa, but that's the direction we're heading. And as I noted in my research, all programs would say that they are on the journey. As we say here, they're in the waka, they're in the canoe, but at different places. We also heard from Dr. Tracy Mawhilio about what is happening across the Pacific in terms of Pacific Indigenous-based social work programs and social work practice, and also how that Pacific knowledge is influencing more broadly social work in New Zealand. And it certainly is a major theme. She talked about the relatively high proportion of Pacific students who attend social work programs in all sorts of institutions, and their influence is significant. And programs like my own will always have a particular section on Pacific knowledge and Pacific practice. So that's its own particular category, and of course comes from its own Indigenous base. I, along with the other speakers, want to encourage further development of the sort of seminar we've been part of. This really feels like another step along in the journey, and with the leadership of ARIISW and Shukutoku University, we've been really supported, and I think our group and certainly other colleagues here in Oceania in the Moana space would be very interested to join in further developments. I see this process of decolonisation, indigenization of social work education as a lifelong project. And so we need to find ways to support each other, to share what we're doing, to encourage each other, and to offer the leadership for our whole profession. I firmly believe this is the way of the future, including for those of us who have traditionally come from a Western base. Indigenous knowledge has a lot to offer, and for some of us, such as in New Zealand, it's forever become a new base from which collectively as a society we're increasingly operating from. So again, thank you. It's been a pleasure to be involved with this and to be part of such a wonderful team. Wishing everyone well. I think that's probably enough from me.
Thank you so much, David. So now we welcome the Vice Dean of Secretary. I'm sorry. We would like to ask you for comments shortly from the University of Johannesburg. Welcome, Professor Barnes, Vice Dean Research in the Faculty of Humanities.
Now, I think we asked him to come at 9:20. In South Africa, it's still 8:30. So I think maybe just with the time zones, you may have gotten it confused. Kana, can you hear me? Kana?
So Shahana, could you start before he will appear?
Yes,
Could you
Kana.
start your reflection?
So I can do my presentation, yes. Do you want to? Can you hear me, Kana?
He appears? Okay. Hi, Shahana. So could you start
Yes,
your
thanks.
reflection? Thank you.
Sawubona, habari, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, kia ora, kunjani. Warmest greetings, acknowledgements, and thanks to all colleagues from around the world, the hosts, organizers, and partners. Just to clarify that I'm not Professor Barnes from UJ, I'm Shahana Rasool from the University of Johannesburg. And I'm also here representing ASWA, which is the Association of Schools of Social Work in Africa. And I'm going to be talking about yesterday's seminar. Prof. Barnes will come on a little bit later to talk from UJ's perspective. So yesterday's seminar on decoloniality, indigenization, spirituality in Africa was groundbreaking and well received. We had 4 papers that were presented, which I will briefly summarize here. And then we had a discussion with my master's social work students and a few other attendees who joined the discussion. And it was really engaging and exciting to be able to have my students be able to engage with different people across the world who are interested in this topic. So first, our first presenter, well, the first person whose presentation I'll talk about now is Dr. Turton, who's from South Africa. And she spoke about the contribution that mind, body, spirit, or MBS is what I will refer to it as from now on, mind, body, spirit. So she spoke about the contribution that mind, body, spirit practices can make to holistic social work interventions with communities. She argued that MBS social work adopts approaches that are non-Western, and as such, it is an important part of decolonizing and indigenizing the social work curriculum. She suggests that as social work educators, we should incorporate different ways of knowing and doing into the social work curriculum so that students have the knowledge and tools to tailor their interventions to suit the context and to empower people to take control of their lives. So it means that we understand and respect that there is not just one way to help a client, family, or community. And through this, we are empowering people, respecting diversity, and using indigenous knowledges. She suggests that as a profession, policymakers, educators, and practitioners, we have to transcend our usual ways of thinking about social work services and find the spaces and forums where we can engage in respectful dialogue on indigenous approaches, such as MBS practices, mind, body, spirit. And so just as we introduce students to a range of therapies, such as talk therapy and play therapy, so should a mind, body, spirit practices be introduced. That was Dr. Turton. Our second speaker yesterday was from Kenya. Dr. Wilkins from Kenya spoke about colonial education in Kenya and how it was race-based, that Africans were given inferior education for manual work, that is to prepare them to work for whites and Asians, while Asians were given education for middle-class level work, such as artisanship, trade, and vocation. And finally, Europeans were through a specialized education system meant to equip them for leadership. Post-independence, the government banned racial segregation in schools. However, some of these things still remain in the Kenyan society. And a big part of our discussion afterwards was how do we decolonize education, because we discussed the way in which education is used to colonize minds and indoctrinate peoples. And so we need to look at ways of making education more liberating and radical by raising critical conscientization. Our third speaker was Professor Augusta Oloware, I hope I got it correct, from Nigeria. And she made a presentation on the importance of an African approach to ethics. Her paper was entitled, "If it takes a village to raise a child, what should the village know? Indigenous realities of privacy and confidentiality in child welfare." That was the title of her presentation. And in her presentation, she showcased areas of conflict between the Western concepts of confidentiality and privacy and the indigenous realities of childcare in Nigeria. We know that in indigenous communities, the village or the collective is responsible for childcare, not just individual parents as in Western countries. However, when it comes to practice as social workers, we take the oath of confidentiality. But in traditional settings, we are faced with multiple non-relative caregivers who are part of the system of the child, who then should have access to information about the child and what's going on. But how is the issues of confidentiality and privacy negotiated in the context of a village or communal care? So this context of communal care creates dilemmas and sometimes ethical tensions for social work practitioners. And so she suggests that we need to include the village in the process. And she asks a very important question. And the question is Is the concept of confidentiality and privacy culturally aligned with Indigenous care, especially in African settings, or is it an imposition of an individualistic Western mindset? So the fourth paper was my paper, and it was entitled The 7 Principles of Thinking, Being, and Doing Decoloniality in Social Work. In my paper, I articulate 7 themes that emerged in a participatory action research process in working towards decoloniality in the social work program with staff and students at the University of Johannesburg. And this was based on the response of students' protests. So the students' fees must fall and roads must fall protest movements in South Africa. Through these protests, students asserted the need for changes and decolonization of various aspects of university systems, including what gets taught and how it gets taught. The reproduction of colonial and Western imperialist knowledges in education was a key aspect of student protests, besides the call for access to education for all. So as a result of these student movements, many academics pushed for further curriculum and educational reform to offset the power dynamics inherent in higher education. To this end, a team of social work educators at the University of Johannesburg decided to embark on a process that would move towards decoloniality in social work specifically. And my paper unpacked the 7 principles that emerged from this process, which is meant to be embedded in the entire undergraduate social work and community development programs at the University of Johannesburg. The 7 principles that I discussed in detail in the paper are, I'm going to just actually screen share because I think that might be useful. Give me a second. Okay, can you see it? So the first theme is power and oppression. Obviously, I'm not going to go through the details of each one. The second one was foregrounding structural issues. The third theme was looking at intersectionality, race, class, and gender. The fourth theme was looking at Africa as the center. The fifth theme was Ubuntu. There was a lot of very interesting discussions around Ubuntu and the reality of whether it still is and does exist. The sixth theme was recognition of indigenous knowledge systems. And the last theme was critical conscientization and voice. So these 7 themes were identified through this participatory action research process as critical principles that all academics would infuse in their courses and their work to embed decoloniality throughout the curriculum and challenge power inequalities. And just to end, I'd like to say that I agree with David that this is just the beginning of a process, and so much is being done around the world. It's been really amazing to learn from everyone across the seas. And I really look forward to further engagements and learning together and finding ways of weaving these different ideas together into looking at how global social work curriculum and international social work can actually take on board the various decolonial, indigenous, spiritual, and Buddhist approaches to social work, which challenge the Western-centric knowledges. And create space for new knowledges and ways of being, seeing, and doing. Thank you so much.
So we would like to share the ARIISW session from Japan. ARIISW coordinated Buddhist social work session on 18th February. It's definitely an unfamiliar concept for social work mainstream. We understand. And during the session, we reported the outline and overview of the Buddhist social work research project itself. It's dedicated. It's reported by Professor Tatsuro Akimoto, our director, and he reported about the activities by monks, nuns, monasteries, and laymen's activities. And the keyword of Dharma, a Buddha's teaching. During the session, I noticed that some keywords. Number one, the suffering. And the second keyword is a social cultural context in Asian Buddhist countries. And third one is the most important keyword, ABC model. So ABC models is a concept of the Buddhist social work. But this research, ARIISW's project has started to collect the activities of Buddhist social work. The social work. And it developed to the Buddhist social work. Do you notice that there's no colon? And it is beyond the mainstream social work. And it related to the re-questioning for the social work itself. So it relates that very challenging topics of this international academic forum. So we would like to, ARIISW is very welcome if you are interested in our research project with other colleagues in Asian countries. So please contact us anytime. So, Shahana, are you still here? Do you have any message?
Yes, I am, Kana. He will be on in a few minutes, just if we can give him.
So now we'd like to open for the participants to join our last session today. Do you have any comments now?
Received one message, very warm message from Bianca Larue. I'm very glad I got the opportunity to join this webinar, and I have learned a lot from all presentations, and will think about all of it as I'm studying in social services. Well done, panelists. Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you very much. So how many people gather today, this session?
Now, 67 participants are online.
67 participants.
Kana, Professor Barnes is online.
Okay, thank you very much, Johannes. Professor Burns, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much, Professor Burns. Here we go. Thank you. Hello. Welcome.
Hello. Good morning, everyone.
Good afternoon and good morning. It is great
Yes.
honor. Okay.
Thank you.
The mic is yours.
Yes. Thank you very much, colleagues, and good afternoon and good morning and good evening if that's the case for you. My name is Brendan Barnes. I'm a Vice Dean in the Faculty of Humanities at the University of Johannesburg. Firstly, I'd like to thank you for the invitation to speak. I'd also like to congratulate you on what seems like a wonderful event. It really is timely. I had a quick look at the program and I regret that I couldn't actually attend more sessions, but here I am, and thank you very much for the invitation. I also reflected on the use of technology and the fact that this was a 24-hour relay academic forum, and it's really fascinating to me to see how technology can be used as an aid, as a tool in terms of promoting the decolonial project. So thank you very much, colleagues. I'm here really to say a few words and to thank you very much for your participation. And the University of Johannesburg, of course, is a partner in this. And as you may or may not know, we are really pushing efforts to think through the idea of decoloniality, decolonization, indigenization, and spirituality. Of course, we have a wonderful social work department that really has been at the forefront of some of these thoughts and ideas, particularly in interrogating the history as well as the current representations of decoloniality and decolonization. They've also really been at the forefront of thinking through ideas around methodology and decolonizing methodologies, representation, and importantly, given the context in which many of us find ourselves, practice, social work practice as well as praxis. Also thought through quite difficult questions around policy as well as the need to incorporate more human dimensions of and personal dimensions such as spirituality and politics. So I'm really proud to be here. I'm really proud that our institution could have a role to play in this. And I'm really happy that this forum could take place with us as partners. In this part of the world, we sit with a deep, deep, deep history of colonization, segregation in various forms, but particularly in recent history, the political and social impact and economic impact of terrible systems such as apartheid. So as an institution, we've had to really think through how we get around that. And the best ways, I think, to do this is to interrogate the values that the institution has. So I'll speak just very broadly about how our institution has managed to do that through really thinking and pinning down values in the way we practice. And there are 4 values, I think, that shine through in the way UJ, the University of Johannesburg, does its decolonial work. And that's really through, firstly, imagining a different future. Imagination is key to all of this, and thinking through how we could imagine a different world, a dream of a different world, a different social work, a different society. The second, of course, is conversation, and that's really important in our African indigenous thinking, but also the best part of democratic thinking is really a respect for conversation and dialogue and incorporating our diversity in terms of thinking about decisions, in terms of consensus reaching. The third value, I think, is regeneration, and that's really to keep ourselves in touch with how we are thinking. Sometimes ideas take different forms, like decolonization. Sometimes they actually can have negative connotations. They can take. Sometimes they can be co-opted by forces that are perhaps not pro-decolonization. So the idea of really touching base continually and regenerating thinking is an important one for us. And last and not least is the idea of a strong ethical foundation. And I think particularly in social work, but in allied disciplines, this idea is absolutely crucial. The idea that ethical foundation forms the basis of what we do and can link us also with our past into the future. So with those few thoughts, I think part of the challenge for the decolonial project, as we might call it here, is thinking through this idea of reclaiming knowledge, reclaiming epistemologies, as well as really connecting with our past and thinking through how memory serves as an important conduit to the way we practice today. To quote Ta-Nehisi Coates, who writes on slavery, memory is the chariot that links us with slavery and pushes us through to the boon of freedom. And I think that's a very powerful quote in this context. But last but not least, I think for many of us, the decolonial project and the indigenization project is a personal one. For many Black and minority scholars, this is a personal mission as well. And I think in terms of how we go forward, we really need to think through also how we leave a legacy for future systems, future ideas, and for future thinking. With those few words, I'd like to stop there and thank you for your time and thank you for your participation. It's been wonderful to engage with you, even if it's over a short period. I'll stay on and listen in for the rest of the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Burns, the Vice Dean Research in the Faculty of Humanity, University of Johannesburg. Thank you. Thank you very much for your cooperation. Thank you so much. So now we received some comments from the participants. So may I pass my microphone to him? So Dr. David McNamb, thank you very much for sending the message. It's beautiful idea. So could you share with your own voices? Thank you.
Excuse me. I'm aware that there are other networks that are aligned with decolonizing social work and social work education. Not that I'm necessarily actively involved in them, but IFSW, to their credit, have an initiative that I know Indigenous Māori social workers from New Zealand are involved in to promote a global social work Indigenous to progress that. There's also a global movement for Indigenous social work, which has involved conferences held around the world. It began in Hawaii. The next conference is going to be here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. That may be next year. I'm just trying to recall. It's not like nothing else is happening. And of course, there are other scholars and practitioners who are publishing in this space, some very actively, who may not necessarily have been part of this seminar. I'd just like to acknowledge Professor Michael Yellowbird, who was I saw his name as part of this seminar, because I'm aware some of the editing and publishing that he's done in terms of Indigenous social work and Indigenous social work education. Just while, if there is a little bit of space, I wondered if I might share a little poster, which is the revised Code of Ethics, or principles for a Code of Ethics for social work in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm not sure if there's time for that, but I could just
go ahead.
Jump through. We'll take some initiative. Sorry. Here we are. Can people see that?
Yes, we can, David.
Yes, good. So I mentioned in my presentation about our social work profession revising the Code of Ethics, and in 2019, quite recently, coming up with this new structure for our Code of Ethics, which is entirely based on Indigenous values. That's the bracket you can see in the middle, and this structure really speaks to a Māori model of a house with the foundation, a commitment and honouring of the treaty from 1840 between Indigenous and the British Crown, through to social work being built on these values. And you can see there are, what do we have, 7 values: rangatiratanga, matatoa, moral courage, kotahitanga, which is about community, solidarity, unity, aroha, which can be translated simply as love, but also compassion and mutual responsibility, manaakitanga, wairuatanga, which I want to note, Professor Hutter was raising about how spirituality and religion might relate to each other, etc. So our profession is now firmly based on this Indigenous principle of wairuatanga, which is fundamentally spirituality. Certainly a comprehensive sense of well-being, and both the significance of where people are from, their requirements, what makes meaning in their life. So I just thought this might be of interest because it really signals, I think, for us in what's been a strongly colonised from the West country, quite a shift where we've gone away from that traditional code of ethics, about respect and confidentiality and self-determination. Very good principles, but they've all been couched in Indigenous terms with all the richness that those Indigenous terms invite. I'll stop sharing. Here we are.
Okay, thanks, Kana. I was just reflecting on the code of ethics that David shared. Thank you so much. It was something we were discussing about how in Africa we need to Africanize the code of ethics as well and indigenize it. And one of the interesting conversations yesterday amongst the students and the panelists was around the issue of Ubuntu. And I saw, David, that this was one of the things, the communalism and a communal approach that you reflected on in your code of ethics. And the questions that were asked, and I'd love to ask this of David and maybe other people as well, because I think in many Indigenous communities, communalism is quite a core part of the way we operate. So like Oluwara's presentation was about, when we raise a child, we don't raise a child as individuals, but we raise them in community, in a village. And often kinship is not just people who are blood related. A neighbor could be a father, a neighbor or friends could be sisters. So the notion of family is much broader than blood ties. But one of the questions and the engagement was around to what extent has Ubuntu, which is the concept we used in Africa, still relevant, and our communities still holding on to these values, or have we so couched ourselves in individualistic, capitalist neoliberal values of acquisition? So have we moved too far? Can we go back? And so those were some of the questions and engagements yesterday that I thought was really interesting. So I think it would be really interesting if the panelists could comment on that from their perspectives in their contexts.
Thank you, Shahana. Thank you. And okay, we received a message from Professor Adi Fahaldin from Indonesia. Thank you. Thank you, and very glad opportunity sharing idea and experience from today webinar made me realize that the issue of spirituality in social work is still a tough homework because not all educators and practitioners realize the importance of spirituality in social work. Second, indigenization has not been structured in social work education, including any aspects, whether in curriculum, teaching materials, and practicum, also in social work practice. Implementation by social workers with clients. Third, indigenization by social workers in practice is often not well documented because the practitioner often does not place importance on research and publication of its practical implementation during the years he was worked. In the same situation, most social work educators still totally use social work references from the Western without any desire to innovate, adaptation, and modification in teaching materials in the classroom. Oh, thank you very much, Adi. Thank you. We lost the connection with Adi at this moment, so I read his comment for him. So now I would like to welcome Professor Vimla. Thank you very much for joining us. Vimla, can you hear me? Oops. Now you notice that where we are.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
Welcome, Professor
Well,
Vimla.
oh,
Long
I'm
time no
so
see.
happy. I'm so happy to visit Japan again.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Very exciting to find your name on the list.
yeah. Thank you so much. In fact, I'm sorry I missed yesterday's session because of the time difference. But today I was able to sort of, link with all of you. And I can see Dr. Tatsuru in the background. I wanted to say hello to him also.
You mean Professor, you are looking for Professor Tatsuru?
Yes.
He's there.
Yeah, I wanted to say hello to him. Hello. Can you hear me, Tatsuru? Hello.
Hello.
Yes. How are you doing?
Fine. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing fine. I'm sorry I missed your session yesterday because of the time difference. But this morning I was able to, link with you all of you. But I think some of the sessions I have missed.
Thank you very much. Anyhow, you haven't missed anything. Anyway, I'm very happy to see you again, even through internet.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm happy to be there with you. Yeah. I just wanted to make a comment on what the Indonesian participant just said about, indigenization. And I agree with the points that, is it he or she? Dr. Adi, is it?
Dr. Adi is he, yes.
Yeah, so I agree with what Dr. Adi says, because there have been processes of indigenization in the Indian context. However, we don't document or theorize enough. And I think we need to take up very specific research, like what Professor Tatsuru has done, in studying what Buddhist social work would look like in Japan and other countries. So I think we need to, on the Indian side, also take up research projects. But there has been a lot of concern and awareness that we need to have our own local assumptions and hypotheses, for generating and for recognizing indigenous knowledge, and also the use of spirituality. We are using spiritual values in our practice, but not maybe in a very conscious way. And we need to research more. Thank you so much for welcoming me and the opportunity, and congratulations.
Thank you very much for precious words. Thank you. Your words encourage us very much. Thank you so much.
Thank
Now
you.
we hand over my microphone to Dr. Joseph to conclude our 24-hour relay session. Okay.
Hello, everyone. I'm afraid that it's impossible to summarize today forum in just 10 or 15 minutes. So it will be, I'm afraid, there will be no conclusion, but only a comment I would like to share with you. I'm also afraid that after 24 hours spent in front of 2 or 3 pieces, I'm almost impossible to follow ideas longer than go to bed. And I'm afraid that my thought wouldn't be consistent and consistent enough to share with you, but I'll try. I would like to share with you three comments. The first is on culture. During these 2 days, while talking about decolonization, indigenization, or spirituality, you have heard terms such as culture background, indigenous culture, cultural relevance, cultural competence, or cultural humility, etc. Culture is a term often used in the field of social work. However, sometimes the term culture is misunderstood. Sometimes you can hear, I have a culture, or I have no culture. Actually, culture is not a thing. Therefore, it doesn't make much sense if you have it or not. Culture is a continuing process, the same as language, being shared for centuries and also being shared right now at this moment. Culture is about sharing and is a process of interacting. Therefore, it's very dangerous to say, and actually I've heard this dangerous word from a representative of social work organization for at least 2 times, that the culture of a particular country or region should be changed because it doesn't meet principles of social work. I'm afraid that only some dictators in the past were trying to forcibly change the culture. And I'm sure that this is the way social work should not follow. And I'm happy because I feel that during the 2-day forum, we all have shared culture as an important process, as an important component of our identity, not as a dependent variable of social work. The second comment will focus on society. As you know, social work is a term composed of social and work. It's not only a society, and it's not only a work. Is there only the one unique society in the world? The same social structure all around the world? The same concept of individual or family? Or the same communications patterns or patterns of behavior all around the world? If your answer is no, then it would be probably hard to say that there is only one unique social work for the whole world. The value system has been shaping the way how society is constructed and recognized by its members. For example, the value system based on Buddhism allows people in Vietnam or in Sri Lanka to recognize mangroves, forests, or animals as members of society and as a subject of social work indeed. You may argue that as a social worker, using the environmentalist approach, you can respect clients' specific culture and his or her social network. But what to do if souls of dead or ancestors are also recognized as members of the society and as members of one's network, as seen in Japan and many Asian regions? This factor may bring us to the debate on universalism and relativism. And we should be aware of Hofstede and others who prove that in many cases and many various areas, not only in social work, we often tend to use systems, theories, and methods developed in different environments, different societies, or cultural background, which are not compatible with the subject. The third and last comment will focus on indigenous context. Our world, the world surrounding us, is full of global context. You can hear words such as global or think globally, act locally. Actually, these concepts are used in the business strategies of companies that are expanding overseas, trying to sell their products on a global market and trying to make it acceptable all around the world in a global context. But is social work a global product? We just need to adjust to fit the indigenous context? My answer is no. Social work is an indigenous product. We should share and we should think about it in a global context. It's completely opposite. Sometimes we are majorities and we find ourselves among a minority sometimes. Some of us were colonized 100 years ago, and some of us 1,000 years ago. Some regions were invaded and some occupied. But we still have continuous cultural identity, the indigenous identity. I would like to say that we all are indigenous. The culture has been shaped and shared in the indigenous context. The social work has also been shaped and shared in the indigenous context. So if we think about social work, first, I would suggest to share various forms of indigenous social work and to respect its diversity all around the world. Then we may put it together and to see what's the same and what's different. And I guess there will be a lot of commonalities we can share broadly around the world. And based on these commonalities, we can build social work which is acceptable, which fit the whole world. So this is the message based on 2 days of our discussions and of our sharing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Joseph.
So I would like to share a comment from Professor Adilbish from Mongolia. This is many thanks to all presenters and organizers of ARIISW for sharing their thoughts, ideas, and experiences regarding indigenization, decolonization, and spirituality. That's really related with social work and what we do every day. We have learned a lot and coming back with full of ideas and experiences. Thank you. Wishing all the best and happiness to all of you on behalf of Mongolian social work educators and practitioners. Thank you very much, and our warm greetings goes to Mongolia. Thank you very much.
So thank you all. So now we would like to conclude the Rwanda session today. Thank you for gathering, and we would like to move to the closing ceremony. Okay, so now I pass over the microphone to our colleagues, Professor Fujimori.